Alright, so we've built this geometry in SOLIDWORKS, and as a little bonus video, I want to talk about import and export functionality. Because there's a pretty good chance that you're definitely not just building your SOLIDWORKS geometry just to look at it on your screen. You actually want to use it for something, and that's usually going to involve exporting the geometry for use. So in this and a couple of subsequent videos, let's talk about some of those features here in SOLIDWORKS, starting with exporting to SOLIDWORKS. That might sound kind of funny, but let's say we want to send this to somebody via email so they can open it up in their version of SOLIDWORKS. Well, we might go File, Pack and Go, and that will allow us to save out all of our parts either into a single folder or just straight to a zip file, and then we could just pack up that zip file and email it to somebody. They'd be able to open it up, provided they have the same version of SOLIDWORKS that we have or later. So this is a really important point. SOLIDWORKS is almost never backward compatible. So SOLIDWORKS 2013 can open 2012, 2011, 2010 files, no problem, it all works perfectly. However, SOLIDWORKS 2011 will not be able to open SOLIDWORKS 2012 or 2013 files. That's just the way it is. SOLIDWORKS 2012 has some new backward compatibility features that allow it to read 2013 files in certain very limited instances, but let's just ignore that because really it's a mess and it doesn't actually work that well. So if we want to save this for 2013 or later, then we could use Pack and Go. But what I want to do is save it for somebody who's using SOLIDWORKS 2012. Now, if that's the case, I'll have to go to File, Save As, and the best format for opening in SOLIDWORKS is Parasolid. Parasolid is the native kernel, the geometry kernel, for SOLIDWORKS, meaning it's the deepest part of SOLIDWORKS. It's the way SOLIDWORKS represents geometry in space, and if we save out a Parasolid file, we can be certain that there's no translation of geometry involved. We will get exactly out of it what we put into it. So let's save a Parasolid binary. And by the way, there is this other one called Parasolid text. It's a text file essentially. We don't usually use those. Just use the Parasolid binaries and forget about the other ones. So I'm going to save this in my folder here. And it always asks when you export things in SOLIDWORKS, if you have stuff hidden or suppressed in your assembly, it asks if you want to save that stuff or not. In this case, I don't want to. I only want the visible components in my assembly. And then I'll hop over to SOLIDWORKS 2012. Now, SOLIDWORKS 2012 wouldn't normally be able to open this assembly. So if I go to All Files here, and I were to grab my AMPI assembly file and open that, it's going to say this is a future version of SOLIDWORKS, and I can't open it. But if I go here and open up that Parasolid file, that x_b file, then it's going to do it. Now, it may take a second to translate it, but once it comes in, let's change this to shaded with edge mode, and it's going to look pretty much exactly the way that it did in our 2013 assembly. In fact, the entire assembly hierarchy is going to exist in exactly the same way. Now, there are some issues here, though, which is that no longer do my mechanical mates work. I've lost all of that mating information. Everything's just fixed solid in space and can't be moved. So we would have to remate that, re-articulate it. Also, all of our design history is gone. So if I open up this neck part, you'll see that all of that fancy feature tree work that we did over here with all those editable features, those are all gone. So the only way to make changes to this model would be to do manual direct editing, which is often a little bit messy. So keep in mind that if you export a Parasolid file, upside, you can open it in any version of SOLIDWORKS. Downside, you're going to lose all of your history. But let's actually talk about that downside a little bit, because sometimes it's not even a downside. There are times when you actually want to get rid of your feature history. So if I were to open up this neck file, for example, we see that we have a whole bunch of features here, and it may be that I just want to freeze that so that all those features go away and I'm just left with the basic geometry. There are lots of instances where you might want to do that. For example, if you're sending it to a manufacturing facility and you don't want them to accidentally make any changes to your file. Or if you just get a really complicated feature tree and it's just confusing you and you want to start over and get rid of all the errors, well, you can always do File, Save As, save a copy, and just save that as a Parasolid file. So we'll just save this neck file as a Parasolid. And then right here in the same version of SOLIDWORKS, just open that new file up. We'll go back and find that neck Parasolid file, open it, and I don't need import diagnostics because it's perfect. So now I have an imported version of this with no history tree. And I've actually got scripts we can talk about in another video that make it really easy to basically flatten your history tree just by kind of exporting and re-importing a file. Really useful stuff to know. So that's exporting to SOLIDWORKS. But what if you want to export to Rhino, for example? Well, let's talk about that in another video.